then she normalized it.
She sure did. Like a person could get real affected by her fame, and she doesn't like it when you treat her a certain way until you find out who she is. And she doesn't like the opposite either. She just wants you to be real. Not too
Right.
much to ask.
Right.
I love her.
Yeah, no, she's great. That was a good interview.
Thank you. Thank
Enjoyed
you
that.
so much. Facebook people, a lot of you never watch the show when it's going on, and I'm telling myself I'm okay with that, because that's the way you're telling me what you want. So who am I to argue with what you want? Just watch the show and maybe share it with a shut-in or a military person or somebody who's depressed. Just share the love. That's all. Share it if you like it. Yeah, I'm on YouTube, comedian Linda Marcus Smith. Sure, you can subscribe. I don't know. I think the word subscribe is what's, it's chasing people away. It sounds like sub. I don't know who came up with, you want me to do something, don't start with sub. Anyway, maybe that's the problem. Maybe I don't have any content. Who knows? But anyway, you're here, you're watching, you're probably dressed. Don't tell me anything. Just sit there and kick back and watch the blinking lights. We're going to have some fun. I have a cool guest. I'll get to him in just 1 second. First, what I want to tell you is this show was started so that you at home or on your computers can find out who people are. Because when they're performing, you're seeing who they want you to see. Now you get a chance to find out, do you like them? Do you relate to them? Are they funny? Are they your kind of funny? Do you want to support their career? Do you want to share their stuff? That's what this show is for. That's what I have to say. I'm a military veteran of the Army, and so I'm now a member in the Veterans of Comedy organization. You can go to veteransofcomedy.com when you want to hire somebody who used to sling a weapon and now slings jokes. I'm down there. You have to scroll. It's like finding your date of birth. You have to scroll down to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So you'll see me down there by the Dead Sea Scrolls with just scroll past all the men, ho hum, where's a good looking woman? And that's me. Just kidding. Will Clifton, if you haven't gotten tired of me saying this, you don't have the right hearing aid. Anyway, so much for my lame attempts at humor. And now I'm going to tell you who my guest is by reading the intro he sent me. And this is going to be the very first intro I haven't screwed up yet out of 1,004. Ready? This should be mine.
I thought that was going to be in the third person. Now it's going to make me look like I'm like some egomaniac.
I love it when people write in the third person and I'm sitting here going,
well, because it's hard to sit there and just praise yourself. And hey, I'm great. I've done everything. That's a little difficult. I mean, at least for me it is. So, but anyway, do your thing.
Okay.
I'm along for the ride.
He says, Brett Eidman is an award-winning actor, comedian, publisher, and inventor. I can't wait to hear all this. He has been seen, I read like a first grader. He has been seen on Saturday Night Live, Godfather of Harlem, and the Netflix series Daredevil, just to name a few, by the way. On January 28th, Brett will be at the premiere of the film Haunted. It's a short horror film that Brett stars in. He also performs regularly with Blind Tiger Improv. So let's welcome him to the stage right now to see what I said wrong.
Thank you. No. I just didn't want to sound like pompous, but I don't think that was just basically, that was okay. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
That was a good intro. I love what you said about yourself in the third person.
Well, I just, those credits are legit. So that's good. At least I didn't have to fabricate. I think back in the day, maybe fabrication was needed, but no, those are legit credentials and stats or whatever. And it didn't sound too bad.
No, it sounded great. It's certainly skimming over a lot of your accomplishments that you could have bragged about.
Hmm. Yeah, that's there. I mean, I've been at it a long time, and I mean, geez, I'm 59 years old, and I uh I started when I was in my teens.
Let's talk about when you started, because you came at this very humbly, and you came in a very unique way. I was reading your IMDb. It was like 4 paragraphs. It was really interesting. I don't remember what it said, but please remind me.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. People don't remember when they read my bio. They just they forget it. And I guess it enacts the short-term memory. I think that's my bio does that for people. They just zone it out and they never it's like they never read it. I started basically doing entertainment stuff like at 16 years old, where I became a DJ and doing bar mitzvahs, weddings, all kinds of events, and did that for 28 years, 3,000 gigs, and uh, just it's kind of like a local celebrity, big fish in a small pond kind of deal. People used to recognize me, and now they don't, but they used to. I can't get
During
arrested now, but I back in the day during the 80s, it was kind of like a big deal. And it was nice. It was nice being a big deal. It just, it gave you confidence. I was never cocky, but it was just a good feeling that people really liked your work and were hiring you. And I was turning down more gigs than I was able to book, so, and people were getting really upset when they couldn't book me. And sometimes they would switch the dates. Sometimes, they would cancel and wait. And, it was a nice time in my life. That's for sure.
Did people ever go, this must be kismet, I'm not going to marry her?
Um, I mean, I've had cancellations, but not that many, very, very few. And I mean, I've had people die at affairs that I was playing at. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I mean, to try to find a humorous side to it is like these people would die and they would kind of get the person out of the room as quickly as possible so it doesn't ruin the party. The
Yeah.
poor guy's dead, and they're like, keep the party going. Let's go. We're paying you money to play music. So yeah, all right. So yeah, you're right. I gotta keep the party going. I've had where people like died the night before, like the bride's father, and then the next day is the wedding, and I'm playing at it and I'm trying to get people up to dance, but everybody's mourning and in shock and grief. And I'm like, wow, this is a tough gig. It took me a long time to get them up dancing, and because they just felt like this is not the time or the place to dance. And I'm there to make people dance. So it was challenging, but everything worked out and it was a great run. I miss sometimes I miss it. I actually really miss going to the bank on Monday morning with several checks and you know and and making money like that. I was making more money then than I am that I am now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I was making like adult money when I was a kid.
Wow.
Yeah, I was making more money than like my friends' parents and stuff. It was like, it was great. It was just I was just really lucky to find something that I can actually do, that I could sink my teeth into, do it well. And I look back and I'm like, I can't believe that people like would hire a 16-year-old kid, 17-year-old kid to be the person who's going to be the ringleader at one of their biggest days of their life. It's a lot of responsibility, which back then I was like, all right, no problem. I'm playing another gig. But I look back and I'm like, wow, because I look at the 16, 17-year-old kids now and I'm like, you're really going to put all your money and everything in and leave it up to this person to like make sure that everything goes well. So maybe it was best that I didn't know that it was that big a deal, but it was.
Yeah.
And I never like I just loved it. And I was very professional. I never showed up late. I never pulled a no-show. I never I handled it really well for a kid, and I was just lucky to find it. because it gave me a life.
Absolutely. I want to know, how did you get from being a DJ and famous in your area? How did you get from there to, like, what led you? What were you thinking when you said, okay, I DJ'd long enough, let me go on stage and face rejection in a group with improv and you get into the two best improvs in the nation, maybe
Mhm.
the world. How's that
Yeah.
happen?
Well, right before I became a DJ, I remember my dad like telling me to watch a show that was on Saturday night late. He said, "You got to watch these guys because they're incredible. They're really funny. He says it's very different." And I said, "All right, I'll watch it." And so the first season of Saturday Night Live, I'm watching it, and I like immediately fell in love with John Belushi. And I was like, wow, I love what these guys are doing. And I've never seen anything like this before. And I just, I went bonkers over that. So that was kind of like that planted a seed in my head that I really want to see and explore that at some point. Like, I would love to do that. Whether I could do it or not, that's a whole other story. But I just was like, I would love to be John Belushi. I'd love to be Bill Murray and we have Gilda Radner and Dan Aykroyd. Like those guys were my heroes, And so years later, I started to take like acting classes and stuff. Matter of fact, my first acting class was with Sam Wright, who was the original grape in the Fruit of the Loom commercials. And then he went on to play Sebastian the Crab in the Little Mermaid. And he was in the Lion King. He was great. And so that kind of like got me going a little bit. And then gradually I said, I got to try stand up, and then I'm also thinking, I don't think these guys on Saturday Night Live did stand up. They did sketch comedy. They were doing improv. So where did they all come from? And so after some years passed, I said, I got to get out to Chicago and see, like, where is this place that grows these great talented people. So I flew out there and went to the second city, and I get there and I'm like, wow, this is where it all happens. And I go up to these two guys standing there and I said, look, I'm from New York City, and I know you guys like are probably in this place, and how do I get in? So they told me, oh, you got to send in an application. You got to get uh, let's see, I had to go to somebody and ask them for like a recommendation, and send them a resume and a picture and and then they'll audition you. So those two guys that I met was Chris Farley and Tim Meadows. And this is before they were on SNL. This is when they were out there, and they were really not a big deal, even though they were super talented. And then later on, I remember, so anyway, I did what they told me to do. And then they called me out to audition. So I flew out again, auditioned, and then I found out I got in. And so the next year and 3 months, while I was still DJing, I was flying in and out of Chicago every week so I can go through this whole institution there. And it was just so much fun. And it was like the best time of my life. It was just amazing. And I was meeting all these talented people, who many of them went on to be big stars, later on. They were nobody at the time, and now they just like took off. And the only regret I have in my whole show business career is that I didn't stay there longer. It would have been a smart move, because I could have, they asked me a bunch of times to audition for the touring company, and I never did. And it just so happens that group in the touring company that at that time was Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. And that would have been a nice group to be in.
Yes. Oh.
So, but I was out there for a year and 3 months, and it was just amazing. And then from there, it was more stand up, trying to get some TV work and film work, and and then joining other improv groups, and sketch groups. And yeah, so that kind of got me going. And that was like during the 80s into the 90s. And then of
Well,
course along the way,
I want to know your advice to young comics coming in the biz or people at home who don't know the difference. I want you to touch on the importance of being both left and right on improv and stand up. How those two complement in your opinion, in your words.
well, if you're going to pick a way to go, you better be great at it, because what's going to happen if you go left or right, you're going to alienate half of your audience. And if you're going to do it,
Oh, I didn't mean politically.
oh,
I meant
okay, I thought you meant, okay, I'm
I
thinking
just
politics left or
if
right.
you like there's a choice of improv or most people go, oh, I'm going to do stand up, not improv. And since you're such a pro at both, I was hoping you would explain to people how it's important to have both in your repertoire.
Well, it's been it's been a frustration on my part because of focus. You know, it's hard to focus on several different things. You know, I know, like there was a documentary that I did with a friend of mine and called In the Name of Comedy, and we kind of go into that there, where Lisa Lampignelli, the comedian, says to me, like, you know, Brett, you gotta like pick a direction and go there. You know, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're all over the place. And for someone like me with ADD, it's hard for me to focus. And so I was all over the place, and then in many ways I still am. You know, this is just me. You know, I do the best that I can, but when somebody just has to go where their heart is, you know, where they really have an obsession and a passion for that type of thing, and give it your best shot and keep at it. But you know, I got so far in stand up, I stopped doing it not that long ago because of political correctness and things like. I started to become very uncomfortable on stage doing stand up. I have been recently thinking about going back, but doing it in a different way. Completely different. But I think that people like they, I think they just have to like, it's got to be inside them to say, hey, I want to do this. When I went out to Chicago to audition for the Second City, I in my own head, I just could not see myself not getting in. Like I was kind of like, you know, and maybe that was pompous, or it was, you know, who do you think you are? But I felt like I fit right here. This is where I should be. This is where I want to be. This is where I love this whole, you know. I think I would have really been devastated if they didn't take me. I would have been like, what? You know, like, I know I can do this. And a couple of things I've gotten in my life because I knew I can do it and not let it go. I auditioned for Larry Harmon, who's the original Bozo the Clown. And at the big audition in New York City, there was like, I don't know, there's like a million clowns there and the media and the whole, it was a circus, no pun intended. But I just knew that I can do what was required to do. And because of my experience and everything else, I knew it. So I talked to one of the other guys who hosted a Bozo show in another market. And he told me, yes, stick with it. He says, stay on top of these people and you'll get it. So I did. And then they were auditioning more people out in California. And I sent in a tape and I stayed on it. And finally they said, look, you know, Larry Harmon wants to meet with you. He's coming back to New York soon. And it took me from auditioning to when I finally got the job, like over a year to make that happen. But I didn't want to let it go because I really felt strongly that they can't say no to me. I was just kind of like, you can't say no to me because I know I can do it. You know, so I don't know if that's, it's like, if I heard somebody else saying that, I would think like, who do you think you are? But I just felt it.
Oh, I think that when you get that feeling to that degree, it's almost like a sixth sense. You should go with it. That's how
Yeah, I mean, like there are some things I auditioned for and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna get that one, you know, or I gave it my best shot and so be it. But there are things that I know that I can do. and I know I can do them well. And getting a no answer is kind of like, what's wrong with you? Like, how
Exactly.
dare you? I know what I'm doing, and but it's a constant, you have to stay on it. You have to just stick with it. If you really love it that much, don't let anybody get in your way. And sometimes actors and actresses and comedians and improv people, they spend their like time in classes and they're prolonging the agony. It's like, get up on stage. You got to do it. You got to put the classes aside for a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with classes. I've taken many classes, but it comes time to like, okay, enough with the classes. Now go up there and do it. And
Yeah.
it's hard. Everything that I've done in my life has always been like one of those things like where people would look at it and say, are you nuts? Like, I really, the chances of you making it are slim. The chances of you being successful is slim. Why do you always take the hardest route? And I take the hardest route because that's just not on purpose, not intentionally. It's like, I don't want to travel the road less travel. I'd like to travel the easiest route, but I just don't know how to get there in an easy fashion for something that I love. Plain and
Wow.
simple.
That's amazing. People who do improv and stand up, I'm going to self-disclose a feeling. I can't stand it when somebody, or if they're an actor and they're doing like when they do stand up and it's 75% not stand up. And I'm going, like, I don't want a TED talk on how to be an actor or improv, but when they mesh it in and slip it in on you and it's just skill, like Richard Pryor had acting, improv, and stand up, and you didn't sit there and go, good God, would you just do some stand up?
Right. Well, there are a lot of comedians that don't have the material, and then they have to start going into the audience and saying, what's your name, where you're from, what do you do for a living, and what and that becomes like their whole act. Like, and that's not really an act. That's like a go-to place. I used to like do that when I forgot my material. Like I'd be up there doing my material. So, oh, what's next? And in my head, and I'm like, just go ask somebody what their name is and where they're from and what do they do for a living. And, is this your wife? Like, yeah. So I don't try to, they call it, they call it crowd work. And, an MC for a show can do more of that type of crowd work. I was never like a big fan of crowd work. I do a little bit of it, but not too much, then get to the material. But I have to say, like when I was doing stand-up, it was a little frustrating to me when sometimes jokes didn't go over the way that I was hoping they would go over. And then I said something that was in the room or improvised for a moment, and that went better than the material that I worked really hard on. And I'm like, I can't do a whole improv stand-up set. I guess I could, but that's like that's almost like insane. I don't think I could do an hour. Maybe I can. I've never tried it, but I wouldn't feel comfortable saying like I'm going to go up there for an hour and just wing it. I don't know anybody that does that, and people that don't know comedy, they really do think that everybody's just going up there and just talking like it's like at the top of their head. I mean, they used to say, wow, Robin Williams like was incredible. Like he just off the top of his head. And yeah, a lot of that was off the top of his head, but he had a brilliantly written act. If you saw him 2 nights in a row, you would actually know how much of that was brilliantly written. Of course, he's able to take his material and switch it and swap it and go at the moment and it's be super fast. I've seen him perform and it was just blew my mind. But he worked hard on his material. And anybody that's great, Richard Pryor and, those guys, George Carlin and these guys like worked incredibly hard on their material and they didn't wing it. You don't make it in comedy by winging it.
No,
Or any occupation.
no, you don't. Wait,
Yeah.
who in your life, living or someone who's passed on gave you the best advice or helped you the most, or was your idol that you wanted to be the closest to? Because when I'm talking to you, I'm thinking Bob Newhart.
Why? Because my bald head?
No, there's something about you that's very Bob Newhartish. You're humble, you're in the moment. I don't know, there's something very Bob Newhart about you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I
No,
loved his comedy.
yeah, and he's still around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, there's so many great people that I just always wanted to be like. And I always like enjoyed watching them or be inspired by them.
Who were
But
some of them?
oh, oh God. Well, I said the guys on Saturday Night Live, and there was also George Carlin, and even Robin Williams and Billy Crystal. Those guys, even my dad was like really was incredible. He was funny, very real. He was like one of those guys, you could set your clock by him. If he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. He was smart, and when I would watch George Carlin, I was always constantly thinking of my dad because they thought the same way. My dad felt the same way about religion as George Carlin did. He felt that, it was just those two guys were like really very so similar. My dad never.
I love George Carlin, and probably would have loved your dad because they think for themselves independently and didn't care how it landed. I mean, I love that aspect of George Carlin.
Yeah. Well, my dad had the same kind of thought process as George Carlin, and they were on the same level. My dad never performed, but I just was, there was many times when I was with him where he would say things to me that would just blow me away. Would either be off the walls funny or just so insightful that how did this guy figure this out? Like, how did he know about that? And it was a constant, with my dad. It was kind of like, anything that you wanted to talk to him about, he would know something. And if he didn't know it, go back the next day and he'll be an expert in it.
Wow.
He was like really unbelievable. And he was my go-to guy, for till he died, I mean, there wasn't anything that I couldn't discuss with him and get a really good opinion on it, like a solid opinion. And my mom was similar in a way, where, I could go to her and ask her, for advice and encouragement. If you really want to do it, give it a shot. When I came up with the crazy idea of like wanting to be a DJ, I was 15 years old. I went to my parents and said, like, can I borrow some money? Even though my parents would never ask for money back, but I would say, can I borrow some money so I can buy some equipment to start this DJ business? So of course my parents had to talk it over and like, what's Brett going to do now? Like this, where did he come up with this? And so my parents like gave me the money, and they figured that worst case scenario, if Brett can't handle this, we'll just have some good audio equipment. That's it. That was the worst thing that can happen, is that we have a nice stereo system in our house. So and they did. I mean, it was a lot of times in my life where my parents, there's one time when I was a little kid, like there was a mini bike that I wanted. I really wanted. It was beautiful. And it was $180. Back then, they're talking about in the 70s and early 70s. I was just a little kid. And I remember my dad going out to the phone booth outside of Job Lot in New York City and calling my mom and asking her, like, can we get this for Brett? I really want to get this for Brett. And her saying, well, we only have $200 in the bank. So my dad says, well, that, but it's cost 180. And she says, I really want to do it. He says, don't worry, I'll make it up. I'll sell another. He was in the insurance business. I'll sell another policy. I'll work extra hard. I'll do this. I'll do it. And they bought me a mini bike for $180 when they had $200 in the bank. So that's where I come from, and it was just, so all of that helps you get to where you need to go. All that encouragement, all that support. I was very, very lucky in that area. I had two great parents. I had a great childhood. I have no complaints. Maybe if one of my parents abused me, I would have been funnier, because a lot of that. And actually, I told my parents that, maybe if you guys were a little bit abusive, I could have a better career in show business. And they said, look, Brett, if it helps you, you could tell people we abused you. So it's like, all right, well, if I get that desperate,
Well,
so
let's talk about your career spanning into comedy and on screen and many appearances. Tell people watching, take me through your career, all your accomplishments that you don't like to brag about, but we need to hear.
Well, let's see. So I mean, I've done a bunch of films, and all those came from auditioning and for most of my career, I didn't have an agent or a manager. I mean, now I have a manager, and it's just a lot of auditioning. And then when you get a job, you jump for joy and you appreciate it, and you hope that it brings you some additional work. At least it gives you a little bit more confidence to try to get something else. Yeah, so I mean, I did a film called Fourth Man Out, which was which is probably maybe still is on Netflix, and it won all kinds of film festival awards, and I have a small part in there, and I was happy as can be. It was a couple days on the set, and it's really cool. Like when you get even a little part, that how they treat you, like, it's like, hey, you're over here, and can we get you anything? And it's very nice. I mean, very, very early on, I did some extra work, and I couldn't stand it, because I was so close to the celebrities and stars. I wanted to do scenes with them. I didn't want to be a tree. I didn't want to be the guy who said, hey, there's my elbow. I was kind of embarrassed to say that, look for me, don't blink, because if you blink, you're going to miss me, because I'm one of 1,000 people in the audience and I'm there, So I did a lot of that, and it was really, it was like degrading in a sense, it was kind of like, what am I doing this? Well, how is doing all this stuff going to help my career? Am I going to put together a reel of me being a tree and saying, hey, you got to book me. Look at this. I'm a tree on 20 different shows. So if you're going to play a tree and you want to be a tree, then make a video with your best tree parts. And, and if the Wizard of Oz, if they do a remake of the Wizard of Oz, maybe you'll be a tree. At least those trees talk. They threw apples. I mean, I would have loved to have been a tree in the Wizard of Oz, but most roles, as you're just in the background, and that's what you have to do. I mean, just to get in there, you just gotta you gotta just see what it's like to be on the set and to see how they do it, and then just trying to keep getting better at it. So yeah, I did. So I did Daredevil on Netflix, which was a big gig for me to get. Anything that's on network television is exciting. Godfather of Harlem. There was a nice little part there, and that was interesting thing about Godfather Harlem. That was shot during COVID, and they kept delaying the date of the shoot because of COVID, and we can't have people in. You got to wear a mask, and they had me going to take COVID tests like all the time. It was like, we're going to shoot next week, but we need you to take a COVID test now, and then 3 days later, and then 3 days later. And so I ended up making more money doing COVID tests than the actual shoot itself. I mean, I don't get a residual on the COVID test, but I can get a residual on the show. But I couldn't believe that. I was getting paid to go get a COVID test. And I don't know how many times they sent me down, it's a couple $100 a pop. So I'm like, oh, good. Send me again. They could jam that toothpick, that Q-tip up my nose as much as they want. I'll be back. You want me to go a couple of times a day? I'll go. So yeah, it was that was fun.
I'd be at home making up fake emails to them and saying that now they are finding out that you have to be tested 4 times a day.
Yeah. And then I did some videos and stuff where they had COVID testing, but it wasn't as strict as what the Godfather of Harlem was all about. And and then I just recently did a film that's premiering at the end of January at a big premiere, and they're gonna, they already, like, I think there's like 7 or 8 tickets left out of like a couple of hundred. So it's gonna be a big event. And
what's the name of the film and where's the premiere gonna be?
Okay, it's in let's see, is it Cranberry? Yeah, it's Canberry, New Jersey, or Cranberry. It's one of those. I think it's Cranberry, New Jersey. I don't know. It's at the Cranberry Theater. I guess we'll call it that, on Cranberry Street. That's all I can know. It's in Cranberry on the 28th, and it's part of a trilogy, an anthology. There's 4 shorts that this director writer Tom Ryan put together, and then he wraps it up. There's a little bit of a thread, and then he has these recaps like in the end, the beginning, and it's just really cool how he puts it all together. And these 4 films are going to be shown in that same premiere. That film was like the best part I've ever had. It was the lead, and but here's the kicker. We shot that a month after my mom passed, and I had such a hard time with focusing, the memorization of all the dialogue, and I was really, really rough. And I should have been having so much fun, because this is the kind of role that you die for. I should have been glowing, with excitement, and I wasn't. I was just kind of like, I got to get through this. I just gotta. And the director and writer of the material, Tom Ryan, it was like, he was so like decent to me, and basically spoon fed me the whole way through. And he was happy the way it came out. I did see it, and I thought it was pretty good. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. So maybe I could, get more of a real solid feeling about it. But I just know that I wasn't as present as I should have been, and that bothered me. But I think in the end, the film came out good. So, but it's hard to put, something like that aside and just forget about it. And, or even though I felt like I had a good grip on things, but inside my head, it just wasn't working. And, I kept apologizing. I mean, technically he could have said, you know what, we're going to recast this. You're not up to this. And he didn't do it. He wrote the role for me, and he just cut me so much slack. It was just, it was great, and I'm glad that I did it. I'm glad that he was so generous and decent about this whole thing. With me saying I'm sorry all over and over and over again. And he got me, got through it. So.
And he knew that wasn't typical for you.
I hope, yeah, I don't think because I worked with him before, and I really, I'm always prepared. I'm always, I don't go to the set like not prepared. And I work hard on anything that I'm going to do. I work hard at it and do it the best I can do it. And this was, no exception, but it just wasn't, wasn't planned. It wasn't getting into my head. And I went over the script and the dialogue so many times. rehearsing it at home, and I put it on tape and listening to it in the car over and over and over again, and just, and then when I get to the set, I still have the script in my hand, checking out before, and then all of a sudden lights, camera action, that kind of stuff. And then like, okay, it just, where did it go? So that was tough, but we got through it, and I think the film came out really good. So
you just explained my first 6.5 years in stand-up.
what, I'm sorry?
With a brain injury, my first 6.5 years of comedy stand-up was practice, get on stage and forget. Like, it just, when you have a brain injury, you really need to have some improv skills, because anything could come out of your mouth that has nothing to do with, and I just have to go with those moments.
I didn't know that you had a brain injury.
Yeah, I got hit by a drunk driver, and I started comedy, and it took 6.5 years for my brain to settle down and be able to memorize things, and for me to relax when I would forget and just go with it.
Yeah, it's hard to hear you. It's breaking up a little bit. I don't know why.
I wonder
It was
why.
fine it was fine up until just now.
Oh, I see why, but 1 second here for it. I know exactly why. Plugged in. Now is it better?
Oh, that's great.
Good. It was running low on the battery.
Okay. So that's so you bounce back from something that life-changing devastation.
Yeah.
Wow. And how does it affect you now?
So now, like, I really don't like going on stage and saying anything about my brain injury, because number one, it's nobody's business. Number two, I don't really think it's funny. It's hard when I have those oopsie moments for me to cope with them. And I'd rather not start off by letting the audience know I have a brain injury. So then they're looking for everything I do. Do you believe her? Oh, if I remember my lines, they don't believe it. And if I forget my lines, like, I don't want sympathy laughs. So
Right.
like, once in a while, if I feel the audience is really cool, I'll say it and then do it as I'll purposely make a mistake way later and have a callback. But I really don't like to. It seems
no, because then that puts it plants a seed in people's heads, and they're going to be looking at somebody with a brain injury, and I used to see comedians all the time in New York City going up on stage and telling the audience, like, well, I'm a lawyer, and then all of a sudden we're not seeing a comedian anymore. We're seeing a lawyer on stage, and we don't like lawyers. So like no one's laughing. You can go up on stage and say that, I used to be a lawyer, and then you could joke about different things. But yeah, when you put a label on yourself on stage, and then that's what people are seeing. So yeah, if you went up there and say, oh, I have a brain injury, people are going to sit there and be, first of all, if they have half a heart, they're going to sit there feeling, bad for you. And also they may, who knows where their head's going to wander when they really should be thinking about your material and paying attention.
I know, like, I've seen their eyes when the spotlights aren't too bright, you can see what they're thinking. And when they'll go, oh, welcome to stage, Lynn Marcus Smith. And their eyes are like this. And then if I have ever said as a mistake, if I've said I have a brain injury, then their expectations come down. You can see it in their eyes. Okay, cool. Well, this is going to be, like, this ain't going to be much. Or they look at their partner and like, they're there to have a good time. Why am I dumping that crap on them?
Yeah. It's basically like going on stage and saying, hey folks, can you cut me some slack?
Exactly. That's what it is. That's
right.
it. Bingo.
Yeah. That would be like, you just go, hey folks, just cut me some slack. But so then they're going to get, okay, this guy, this woman is just like, okay, they're not professional, or, I mean, if you said that you have an injury and you're 100% healed or, a lot of comedians have got up on stage and say, well, I was an alcoholic and I'm 10 years sober now, and, and get the applause and people like them and say, oh, that's great. But yeah, you don't want to put something in somebody's head that's going to really then take away from the rest of your act,
Exactly.
you know. And then also them thinking that, okay, is this a joke or is that for real, or where's she going with that?
Yeah, it's a no-win, and I've seen comedians that, like to brag that they have a brain injury, and they'll go, my name is so and so, I have a brain injury. And then like 30 seconds later, they'll repeat the line and get a huge laugh. And I'm thinking that is so hack. I have seen that 1,000. That is not original. People, quit laughing.
Yeah.
Don't laugh at that.
Yeah, I worked with a comedian once in New York City where he did have a brain injury, but he had to say something because he could hardly speak. And so you, as soon as he goes up on stage and says hello to everybody, and you're saying, geez, what's wrong with this guy? So he goes into it, I had a brain injury, and then he does some material about, not feeling sorry for him, but some things that that maybe that he could never do with this, with this handicap, and it was really hard to listen to him and laugh. You just felt terrible, you poor guy.
Yes. And I know that there's a gentleman at Comic Strip Live who has a brain injury, and he can barely, his gait is, it's almost like he doesn't even have to say he has a brain injury, because you can hear it, you can see it. Me, you can't tell I have a brain injury unless I tell you. So of course you're going to go, really? And you're doing all this and you have a brain. So it's just like, I just want to get up. I want to be seen as a comedian, and I don't want to be seen as the brain. I don't want. No way. Yeah.
It's funny. We have to, it's all about perception and all about people feeling that, okay, we're comfortable because they're comfortable. And if you're nervous, the audience is going to be nervous for you. And there's certain things that you really have to set up. If you're going to do a certain type of material, the audience better know where you're coming from. And I found that out along the way. If you're gonna do anything that's any kind of Jewish material, you better be Jewish, and the audience better know it. And doing certain material without the audience knowing where you're coming from, which I have done, and like, what, they don't know that I'm a nice guy? No, they don't know that. They know you for 30 seconds, and now you're doing something that makes you look like a bad person, unless they knew your history, but they don't know your history.
Yeah.
And I did a comedy CD. It came out, the whole CD came out in 2006, but I had some tracks that I released earlier, and I was getting onto radio shows because I had a song called "Please Don't Marry the Jew," and they were saying, like, what's the deal with this guy? And they were asking me if I was anti-Semitic and everything else. I said, no, I'm Jewish, and they said, oh, then it's okay then, and it was based on real life experience. But if they didn't know where I came from or what the story was, I mean, if Adam Sandler put out the Hanukkah song and people didn't know he was Jewish, they would be saying, like, this guy's an anti-Semite, but everybody knows he's Jewish. So if he does something, anything close to Jewy, they're gonna laugh at him,
Yeah.
So yeah, they have to know where you're coming from.
Yes. Last night, no, on Sabbath, when it was Hanukkah the other day, just a few days ago, my mother was Christian and my dad was Jewish, survived the camps. So I've always thought, I'm sorry, folks, but that makes me really Jewish. Well, not according to the really Jewish Jews.
Right. It's the mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got invited to do comedy at the Actors Temple, and I was on Zoom doing comedy for all the people in the temple on the
Oh, that's
Sabbath.
hard.
And I'm starting off giving it away, I'm sorry, it wasn't my mother, and it's not my fault. I'm half Jewish. And I know you don't even think that exists, I want to, just like, there's so many ways to go with that. And I'm doing my set about how I'm 71 and I just figured out how to keep a kosher kitchen. I stay out.
That's great. That's funny.
And this lady in the temple goes, Jesus Christ. And I'm like, that's funnier than my joke. A lady in the synagogue yelling out,
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, then you have to go into the whole Jesus was a Jew, which Christians love that.
Yeah, you do have to let people know when you're talking about, like, and I don't understand. Explain to me, what is the phenomenon? What's the big draw that comics have to poke fun at other groups of people instead of their own? Isn't there enough material about ourselves to poke fun at? I don't think
True.
it's funny to sit there and have some white person picking on Kanye West, for instance, or, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part of that political correctness stuff, you know, but I think it stems back to it's okay for somebody to make fun of somebody who is at a higher stature, like not lower stature, and like making fun of poor people, like what, um, if you're going to do a 9/11 joke, it should be making fun of the terrorists. You have to make sure it's directed at the right people, not just, um, not come across as just being racist, against a certain group of people. That's hard to navigate around, I mean, I've done jokes that, years ago that I can never do now. There was one joke I did that I thought was funny, and I cleared it with some of my Black comedian friends and said, look, I'm not a racist, but would you be offended by this? And they're like, absolutely not. And I asked a few of the Black comedians, because wasn't 100% sure, because I'm not Black, and like, how are they going to see this? How are they going to perceive, like, what's going on here? And I did tell the joke a few times, and there was one time where somebody was waiting for me outside a comedy club in Connecticut, ready to kick my ass, and I had to explain to them the joke. And because, when they're sitting in the audience, sometimes they don't hear everything, and they may not hear the setup. They may hear the bad word, or they may hear part of the joke. They didn't hear the whole thing. And I just stopped doing it, because I was like, I don't feel like getting beat up. I don't want anybody killing me. I don't want to cause, I'm trying to make these people laugh, and I don't need one table there, to like give me dirty looks and to really, or, give the comedy club complaints. Well, we liked all the comedians except for that guy that did that joke. I don't want that. I want to make people laugh. I mean, there's some stuff, even some stuff I put up on Facebook these days. I sometimes put it up and I take it right down, because I'm like, you know what? Somebody's gonna be offended at, almost everything that you put up. Somebody's gonna find offense to it, but you just gotta just be so careful, and I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want to shock anybody at this point in my life. I just want to just move on and do the best I can do, and not offend people, and to have a good time when I'm performing, um, and and do things that are meaningful. One of the things that always bothered me about my act was that it really wasn't that personal, and the jokes were just jokes. They weren't based in any kind of reality, or they weren't a reflection of me and how I thought, and the way that I was brought up, or anything. Like, really, like, people should know who you are when you're on stage, and they have to really be able to see, like, okay, what kind of person is this? They need to know you. You have to expose yourself, and I wasn't. And it's not that I was embarrassed of, like, of myself or my family, or anything else. I just, for some reason, I couldn't open up that can of worms, and I was always like just writing jokes for this, and that's the difference between somebody whose material is remembered and some material that just gets laughs.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be some meat on the bones for it to for people to really remember it, not just laugh at it and then they forget as soon as they, 2 minutes later, they it's like the joke never happened. So anything that I do, like from now on, is like, it's got to have some meaning to it. It's got to have some meat to it, or what's the point? I
What's your
love,
favorite performance and where you made a difference in a group's lives or a person's life that you'll never forget?
I don't, I've been part of shows that were like really great benefits, like, raise money for flood victims and things like that, like, or certain charities and stuff but I don't think my material has ever changed anybody's life. Unless maybe it made them more angry, but I don't think anybody's like said, if it wasn't for Brett's joke, I just wouldn't be where I am today and making my 6-figure salary and driving my BMW. So I don't, my material did not have that kind of meat on the bones. So I
I,
don't think
I did comedy for a guy in the hospital bed at the VA in
oh,
Portland.
wow.
Yeah, and I thought I was changing his ever-loving life with my humor. One joke after another. He was laughing and he was in pain before I got there, and I was sure I put him out of pain. And I leave the room, and it was a code blue.
Wow.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I've never changed for the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's nice when somebody comes up to you after the show and say, well, I thought you were really funny. That's great. You know, uh, I mean, a lot of people will not come up to you and say, oh, by the way, I didn't think you were funny at all. You know, just so you know that, you know, I've never had that, but I mean, I've heard people say negative things about me, that they didn't know I could hear them. Um, which is, I mean, I did a show that I should not have been at. I was the wrong comedian for this group of people. And when I was booked, I said, "Are you sure this group is like my material? This group. Are you sure this is going to mesh? Because I don't see it, you know." And he says, "Oh yeah, you're going to do great." He says, "They're going to love your characters. They're going to love you, and you're going to do great." I said, "I don't feel really good about this, but I'm going to go there and I'll do the best job I can." And sure enough, these people did not get what I was doing at all. And they're looking at me like, we got to kill this guy, and it was like, this guy's horrible. Like I did some material about, or did an Elvis thing that I was kind of like, I wasn't imitating Elvis. I was imitating an Elvis impersonator. And they just thought I was just being a bad impersonator, and that joke went, it just didn't work. And then I'm in like one of my last bits and there was music on and all of a sudden it just stops. And like, and there was a guy that I took with me to the show and to run the sound and everything. And I said, I said to him, I said, Mike, like, why'd you turn off they said they made me turn it off. I said, well, I'm not done. And then I heard someone say, yes, you are.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then I was like, wow, this was the worst show. And I remember somebody going up, there was a band that was coming on after me. And I remember somebody walking up and I was about 30, 40 feet away saying to the band, thank God you are here. Like you're going to save the night. I'm like, wow. And I just basically went to the side and I said to myself, well, I have two choices right now. I can either cry or laugh it off. And what I did is I said, you know what? I'm going to stick around and I'm going to listen to the people walking out. And I'm just going to just say, look, it is what it is. It just didn't go well. And that was that. So when I heard the people talking about the show and I didn't hear flattering things and I said, okay, that's what happens. Hopefully they forgot my name, and
It's so cool that you stuck around bravely to hear what was being said.
Yeah,
because you
I
could have
wanted to
just
hear it.
run out.
I used to do that all the time with my bozo gigs when I was flying all over the place. And I leave the hotel room, with the makeup on and everything else and do the gig. And there's always people around and I would go back to, like, say if I was doing like a store opening or whatever, I would go back to the store when I wasn't in makeup. Nobody would know who I was. Meanwhile, 2 hours early, I was this big star. And I'd go back without makeup on and just listen to them, talk about it. And I was so happy that I always heard really great things. And I felt like saying, "Hey, thank you." And they're like, "Who are you?" Like, but I just wanted to hear what they were saying, and I wanted to get like a review, even though every gig that I did, the company, Larry Harmon Pictures, they would send out a questionnaire, like, how was this guy? Was this, da, 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 and I always got like, 5 stars and, rating but I always wanted to hear what the people were saying, to make sure that, that I'm up to snuff, doing the best I can do.
I was struggling a few years back with somebody told me, "Have you ever thought of being authentic?" And then I looked it
Being what?
up.
Authentic? You ever thought
What a
about
thing
being
to
authentic?
say. And
Wow.
I had one joke after the other that gave nobody a clue who I was, just like what you were speaking about earlier. And so after crying for 2 weeks straight, I decided to come up with material that was authentic, but I didn't know how to. So I went onto the streets of Philadelphia and I wanted to know what people would say. Like you were listening to people after, I thought, let me go ask people on the streets of Philly, where I was living at the time, when you look at me, what do you see? If you saw me on stage, you see me walk up and take the mic, what would you want me to say? What would you not want me to say? What would you assume I'm like? You know, what would really make you mad if I said it? And that's how I developed what persona I have
Yeah.
from people telling me. And I thought, wow, it was so eye-opening what they said.
Yeah. Well, I remember this woman, and I don't remember her name. She was a comedian, and she was absolutely beautiful. I mean, really, really stunning and just gorgeous. And I remember her going up on stage and talking about how she can't get a date. And I'm like, and people are like, I'm not buying into this. Guys are knocking on her door left and right. They have to be, you know, and so yeah, they have to, like, people have to buy it, you know. And there's some people that are famous that to me seem phony as can be, but other people, think they're the greatest and think that they love them and everything else. And I just get a totally different vibe from that person, and I have a hard time laughing at people that I don't like.
Me too.
If I don't like a comedian, or if I don't like a person for one reason or another, I don't, that kind of ruins the comedy for me, because I
Me
know
too.
what kind of person they are, or, you know, um, even though it's kind of too, I don't know. I just think comedy is many times is very personal. And sure, you could be a really hilarious comedian without it being that personal. I mean, there's a comedian that lives not too far from where I live. I could say his name because I'm gonna just say something great about him. Tom Cotter is his name, and he is absolutely hilarious. And but he doesn't really. I mean, he says, "Oh, my wife this or whatever," but none of it's like real in a sense of, like, he's not. But he's likable. And his timing is impeccable, and he looks good and everything else. And I love watching this guy, but he's not really revealing like his his real self. He's not expressing viewpoints or whatever, or really opening up to the audience, but you get a sense that he's a nice person. you know of course he's a smart aleck, but and that's part of his whole shtick. And very, I love watching him work. It's just a lot of jokes and, setup, punchline, and then the setup, and then the unexpected turn, and things like that, going down, sends people down one road, and at the end it's like boom, and it's really good. So I mean, so everybody's got to, like, find their way to where people think that they know you and they get it.
Yes. I love it when Tom Cotter and his wife Carrie Louise, when they go on stage together and play
Yeah.
off each other.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're good. And I know that they work together quite a bit. And my friend manages Tom, his career and stuff. And I met him a bunch of times. I worked with him. Actually, I only think I worked with him once, I think he's great. I think he's one of the funniest guys out there. And but he's a different type of comedian than other comedians, and for what he's doing, that's great. It's perfect. You know, I think Carrie gets a little bit more into her a little bit more personal than Tom does,
I do
from what I've
too.
seen, which is good for her. It's gotta, she shouldn't be Tom and Tom shouldn't be doing her. They gotta be themselves. And
Yeah.
so that's, you live and learn about this stuff as you go along. And I've always had it in my head that I don't want to be delusional, and I don't want to think that it's more than it is. Let's take a, like I got an award this past summer at a film festival, and thank you. It's a small film festival, but it meant a lot to me. But in reality, it's not an Academy Award. It's a small film festival in North Jersey, which to me was super exciting. But it's nothing for my head to inflate, like, oh my God, I'm this, I'm that, I don't know. It's just that the reality is that it's not the biggest award. I didn't get a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Oscars, and things like that, or I didn't get it's not the Kennedy Center honors and things, the Nobel Peace Prize. It's an award at a small film festival. That was really nice, and I was shocked. But let's keep this real. That, okay, yeah, for this one venue, you had something great happen. One event. That's what it is. And then tomorrow, you're going to be out shoveling it again.
It's like being on commission sales. Every day you start at nothing.
Right. Yep.
Talk to us about Saturday Night Live after being in the Upright Citizens Brigade and
Well,
second.
it went the other order. It went in the other direction. I was on Saturday Night Live, got like 8 times over the years. And the first couple of times I was on, it was even before I got into the second city. So I was kind of doing everything backwards. Yeah. That I kept sending them stuff, even though people told me to stop. I kept sending them my resume, and my picture, and I even sent them material sometimes, and I did it over and over and over again. I just kept doing it. And then finally they pulled me out of the file. And I thought when they called me that it was one of my friends playing a joke. It says, look, Brett wants to get on Saturday Night Live, which is, let's call him and tell him we're Saturday Night Live. And and when the woman called me up, she says, "Oh, hi, Brett. This is from Saturday Night Live, and we want to see if you're available this weekend." And and we, I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Okay, great. We're gonna have to get your shirt size and your jacket size, and and you're gonna play a security guard that's gonna, Phil Hartman's gonna jump on you and whatever." And then she says, "You know what? I'm gonna call you back. I'll call you back in a few minutes." And so I hung up the phone, and I'm like, is that like, is that what they do? Like, you just call up, ask, and then all of a sudden, I'll call you back. It just seemed really strange, but there was also a part of me that says, I think this was legit, and I think I was around some people in my family at the time. I said, "You're not gonna believe this. Saturday Night Live just called me." They're like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, they want to know if I'm free this weekend, and I'll have to go down Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and they said, "Brett, you really think they called?" I said, "I think they did, but I could be wrong. I've been wrong before." And then a few minutes later, they called back, and it was legit. They're like, "Do you know where 30 Rockefeller Center is?" Yeah, yes, I do. Yeah, I'll find it. Believe me, I'll find it. I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave plenty of time to get there. I live like 45 minutes away. I'm going to leave about 6 hours before. Make sure that I'm there on time. And it was exciting. And like I parked my car and I walk into to walk up the street to Rockefeller Center, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to work. Like at Rockefeller. I mean, like, wow, like this is insane. And so I go up there, I get to meet, the different performers and stuff, and Phil Hartman, Kevin Nealon, and John Lovitz, and Mike Myers was there, and Adam Sandler, and all whatever. And they were nice to me, and so we had rehearsal where they said, okay, it's gonna be Tony Danza and Kevin Nealon are playing security guards or cops, whatever, and you're gonna jump in a scene on top of Phil Hartman's back, and you're gonna be clubbing him over the head. They're gonna see you, but they're not gonna do anything about it. They're just kind of ignoring it, and it's called strolling along or something to the bit. So we rehearse it, and I jump on top of Phil Hartman's back, and he walks out and then walks back, and so I get off his back, and he looks at me and he says, I am really sorry, but I'm gonna have to tell casting to get somebody else. I have a bad back. And he said, I told him to get somebody who was like really thin and light. He says, no offense. He says, but I said, no, that's actually. Meanwhile, my heart is dropping because I'm like, here was my big moment, and it's getting taken away from me as we, right now. And so he says, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask casting to get somebody else. I said, oh, no problem. Meanwhile, I'm like dying inside. I'm like, no problem. And that's when Phil Hartman and Kevin Nealon came over to me, and they said, like, don't worry, we'll make it up to you. And I was saying, well, is that genuine, or is that authentic, or is this just show business nonsense? So yeah, they a couple of weeks later they called me back, but I didn't get on the show that I thought I was getting on, even though I got paid because I rehearsed and everything else, and I also got a residual because it was like an under 5 part, so I got some money off of it, and I wasn't even on the show. And one thing I did do is that they said, look, we're sorry that we have to let you go like this, but if you'd like to go to the show, if you have somebody to go to the show with. I said yes. I said I have a girlfriend, and they said, well, why don't you invite her and you guys can go and see the show and be our guest. And I said, great. Called my girlfriend. She came down and we watched the show. And on purpose, I left my bag of clothes backstage at Saturday Night Live. So when the show was over, I had a reason to go back. I said, oh, I gotta get back. I gotta go get my bag. So I went backstage, and there's all people running around, and I did my best not to gawk at the celebrities and and sure enough, every time I went down there was always a lot of famous people walking around, and I just had to play it cool. Meanwhile, I'm like, holy, wow, and it was one time Billy Joel was the music guest, and I'm standing out in the hallway. He comes in after a rehearsal, and there's nobody for him to talk to. So he comes over to me, and he starts talking. How did it sound? And I say, oh, Billy, I thought it sounded great. And I started asking him about his new album because I'm a big Billy Joel fan, and he was just super cool. But I was shaking in my shoes, and then I had to call home and say, what else should I ask Billy Joel? I don't know what else to say to him, and it was just so starstruck, and I just couldn't keep it together, but I try to be cool about it, not asking anybody for autographs or pictures or anything. I'm just one of the guys, but meanwhile, I'm so excited.
Oh.
And I'm sure these guys are used to people coming up to them and shaking.
Yeah.
When you meet your idols, it's nerve-wracking. But
let's talk a little bit about the Queen of Mean that she used to be called. You have a history. You and I've talked on Facebook Messenger about your connection with Lisa Lampanelli, who I adore. I've
Mm.
seen her live. Talk to us a little bit about your connection with her, because you know her in a special way.
Yeah, I met Lisa doing open mics in Connecticut, and we became friends. And then I was friends with this other comedian who was dating Lisa, and then they got married, and went to the wedding, and their marriage did not last long at all. And so and I stayed in touch with her, and then her career started to take off, and I was like really happy for her, because I've always known her as a really decent, straight shooter, nice person. And so it was nice to see somebody who, really wasn't that great to begin, everybody's not that good when they're starting out, and so it was nice to see her really work hard at it, and for her to finally I mean, she was told, club after club after club, that we don't want this kind of material in our club. And then when she got one of the, I don't know which roast it was. I don't know if it was the Jeff Foxworthy roast or one of these roasts where she killed. And then all of a sudden the doors started flying open, for her at these comedy clubs that just turned her down before the roast. So her career just changed, big time by doing one of the earlier roasts. And then she did a lot of the roasts, and then she stopped doing them. So I, there was a couple of times I asked Lisa to, hey, help me out a little bit, and she she did help me in certain ways, about my act, and talking to her agents and managers about me, and give me some advice and different things. So she was very cool about that. She ended up doing that movie that I did, the documentary. She's in it. And then, I don't know, it was like maybe a year ago. I was in I was seeing a play, in Connecticut. I don't live in Connecticut, but I'm not that far from Connecticut. And I'm looking around, and I'm with somebody else, and I said, I think that's Lisa Lampanelli in the back. I said, but I'm not sure, and I'm going to feel really stupid if I go over and say, Lisa, and so, but I keep looking back, and I'm like, because he looked different. So after after the show was over, I heard her talking to some friends, and and I'm like, I know that voice, my granddaughter. All right. Oh, we don't know. No, don't touch that. Where's grandma? Where's abuela?
Hi, granddaughter.
Say hello to, that's Linda. Say hi, Linda. Are you leaving?
Hi. What's your name? Hi, darling.
Genevieve.
Oh, Genevieve.
Oh, no, don't play with the scissor. Okay. We'll see you again.
How cute.
I can't believe my wife's not here. Oh, she's in here. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Well, should we cut this short now, or do you want to keep talking?
No, she's okay now. She's okay now. Oh,
okay.
There we go.
Oh, you have a pretty wife.
Oh, thank you. That's funny.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Granddaughters with scissors.
So anyway, I recognized Lisa's voice, and I I said hello and started talking again, and and then she she got out of comedy, and now has become like a life coach, and she's finds that very fulfilling, and I think she's happier. And there were times a little earlier on that I would see her, and I went out to lunch with her a couple of times where she's saying this business sucks. She was not really happy about things that are, and then I remember seeing somebody told me they watched this tape, and it was Lisa, and it was her going off on somebody in the audience, where it wasn't comedy anymore. It was just she was just angry. And I felt so bad that the audience member got to her like that, she just kind of snapped, and I was like, wow, I just never, it's just stopped being comedy, and she's kind of had enough. Um, and I was also part of like a group of people that would go and watch her one woman show that she was working on and give her feedback and stuff. And I thought she was on the right track with her one woman show. And then it got scrapped. And then she started working on another show where it was with 3 other women. And I went to go see that a bunch of times watch it in development. And I thought it was pretty good, but I didn't think it was nearly as good as the one woman show that she was working on. Because that was very, like, for me, there was a lot more, meat on the bones again, like, revealing a personal side to her, and I find that to be, just more interesting and even funnier, even though that, most of the one woman show wasn't comedy, but it was just telling a real story, and dealing with being overweight and dealing with, her ex-boyfriend dying, and this, there's a whole big story there. I mean, she went out with a couple of people that died, so it was interesting, but you saw the excitement kind of fade away for her when it came to entertainment. You kind of saw it coming, but I didn't think that she was going to snap. And then, but I'm really happy that she seems to be happier now than she's been in a long time. Like I said, I haven't talked to her in about a year. And once again, like, 'cause she used to say to me, like, why do you want to be in this business? This business is horrible. And I said, I just wonder, like, why does anybody want to be in show business? And it is kind of horrible in many ways, but it's also fun and gratifying when you get something, you get something going, and you get into something that's worthwhile, and and it's fun, it's whatever, it's a challenge.
Yes.
But Lisa's great, and maybe one day she'll come back and start doing comedy again. I think a lot of her fans will line up again for her.
Oh,
You know,
totally.
yeah,
That would be an
and she's very
amazing
cool.
one.
And
Yeah.
another guy that I used to see all the time and became friends with was Jim Gaffigan. Um, and I kind of, in a weird way, I mean, I kind of saw his success coming a little bit, because I always thought that he was good. Even early on, there was something I always found him funny, and he just got better and better and worked it and worked it. I mean, he became so obsessed, with comedy that he really was out every single night of the week, hitting the clubs, hitting the open mics. He was relentless. And that's kind of, where you have to be in order to make things happen. It can't be done half, can't be part-time. It can't be done half-ass. You got to be all in. And even the UCB in Manhattan, they want you to go to the jams every single night. They want you to marry the UCB. You have to become part of the wood, the furniture here in the building. You got to be here all the time, and you're not getting paid, but if you really love improv this much and you want to get better at it, you have to do it all the time. It's quite a commitment.
Yes, it is.
It's a lot.
One
You know,
of the one of the most interesting things I learned along the way, you get a nugget from people way ahead of you in the biz, still sticks with me today and helps me immensely. So I literally now have the ability to have people get a glimpse of who I am, and are they going to like me? Am I funny? Before I even get on stage and take the mic,
mhm.
because of
Yeah.
some advice I got how to do that. And I would have never thought of that. What's some advice that you got that really opened up your eyes and helped you?
Well, I think along the way, like there's comedy club, owners and managers, whatever, they could give you their opinion on stuff. And you could take it or leave it, and if it makes sense to you, then you take it. But you have to do what's like that feels right for you, um, and you have to be so honest with yourself. I mean, I've there was a time when I was booking some comedy, comedy rooms, different restaurants or whatever wanted to have comedy night. And I say, hey, Brett, can you take care of this for us? Sure. And people would send me tapes that they were horrible. And I felt bad, like not booking them. And because I know what it's like to not get booked. And I know what it's like not to be that good, so what is somebody going to do? Like, at least they're giving it a shot, and it's, I think you have to just look at it for what it is. And like another thing, I mean, somebody would send me a tape where the audience just goes nuts when they announce the person's name. Like, it's like, like it's Bruce Springsteen walking into a club, and that this is it's done up. It's like, it's too much, or the audience is full of it's a bringer show, and they had to bring 15, 20 people, and those people are going nuts, way over the top, um, it's just not real. And for your friends and family to say how great you are and stuff, they're really not even doing you any favors. you know, uh, you know, there was nights when you have to beat yourself up a little bit to just, hey, I don't want this to happen to me again. Like, what did I do wrong? And what can I do better next time? Or maybe there's a reason why people are not laughing at this joke. Maybe the joke's not funny. That could be one. Two, you're not saying it right. You're missing, you're giving away the punchline before you get there. There's a lot of reasons why a joke doesn't work, mainly because they're not funny. But which you have to be open. I think, like, there was a couple of comedians that I would bounce things off of, and they would tell me straight up, like the reason why people are not laughing because this joke is not funny. And I said, okay, how do you really feel? And they said, that's how we really feel. The joke's not funny. And you know what? I would see what they're talking about. I would, okay, I gotta get rid of it. You can't be delusional about all this. You gotta just keep, a reality check and not let yourself get caught up in any kind of nonsense, and just focus on making the act as good as you can and doing the best that you can. And if you're not putting that much effort into it, then you really shouldn't expect that great of results. And if you're putting a ton of effort into it and you're not getting results, then that's just a lot of frustration. I know what that's like too, but if it means that much to you, then you have to accept it. How can you be in a business where there's so much rejection? Well, I don't know of any other, I'm a publisher of a magazine, and part of my job is to go out and get sales. It's a sales gig. So people are rejecting me all the time. Not everybody has the money or wants to put money into advertising and promotion. So whether, I sometimes beat myself up and say, well, I can't believe they don't see the value in this. Maybe it was my lousy presentation that I didn't present the value. Maybe I didn't present the value right. Or maybe they're just like think they're doing the best thing for me just by having me come in and show us the stuff and whatever. And then I say to people, look, it's okay to say no. It's better you say no than me thinking like, maybe I got them, let me call them again. Let me send them another email. Let me, so it's good to, get a yes or a no answer. And boy, I always wanted to get feedback on auditions. I would love to get feedback from casting agents. Like when you do an audition, you just don't have it down, or we're looking for somebody who doesn't look anything like you. We thought this, we thought that, but you don't get that. You don't get feedback. So it's like, so when people are auditioning, they're just trying to do the best that they can and learn from other people. And but it would be really wonderful to get feedback, or it'd be great to get feedback from a casting director that said, look, we didn't cast you because my cousin Billy's trying to get into show business, so he threw him a gig. Okay, well, I get that because it was my cousin too. I would try to help them out also. At least I know what happened. And I don't have to think like, man, maybe I did have a really lousy audition, you know? So, I mean, it's interesting when you don't get the gig and then you see the person who did get it. And you sometimes say, now I get why they got it and I didn't. Or you say, really? Like you put him instead of me? Really? Okay. Who did that guy know? Or what did he do different? But thankfully, when I did, like, I mainly have seen this in commercials where I would audition for a commercial, and then I would see the person who got it, and I was like, okay, that guy's great. At least I was in good company. Like, especially if I know that I made it to the finals. I'm getting called back. I auditioned for the New York State Lottery commercial, and they had me down like 3 times. So the last time down, I was auditioning for the actual director of the commercial, and he comes up to me and he says, "Man, you nailed it." And I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "Yeah, he said, that's just great." So I walked out of there going like, well, what does that mean? I nailed it. He didn't say I booked it or didn't say that. And sure enough, I didn't get the gig. And then I saw the guy who got it, and it was just, I think it was between me and him. And they went with a guy who totally like different look. He had a goatee and he had red hair. He's like, a whole different, and he did a really nice job in the commercial. But that I could see they went with him, so they went with him. Well, there's nothing I can do about it.
What are some commercials that you mentioned a few in your bio? What are some commercials you did get that you really liked doing, and why?
That I did get it. That I did get. Okay. I did a commercial for a casino, Saratoga Casino and Racetrack, whatever, which was a lot of fun. I don't remember the audition for it, but I do remember going up there, and I think it was one of the first times that they actually paid me more money than what they told me that they were going to pay me. So like because I did travel, and I went there the night before, so I could be there on time, and it was out of my own pocket, and I was fine with that. And then at the end, they said, "Look, we appreciate you coming up, and you traveled, and you really gave us everything you got, and so we're going to give you some money for travel and everything else." So I thought that was really cool because they did not have to do that. Then I did one for a hospital. I did a political ad for a candidate who was running for office in New York City. I did one for the search engine Bing, Bing. That was also with John Starks, the basketball player, which was a lot of fun. I really thought I was booked for a comedy video, and I thought there was going to be somebody playing John Starks. When I got there, they said, "This is a commercial," and that's John Starks, So that was fun, and he was great. I just, but I didn't know that I was working with the real John Starks, the famous I don't know if he's Hall of Fame, basketball player. He probably is. So those are just fun. I like doing commercials. I think they're great. Tell a story in 30 seconds or a minute, and get in, get out. Like it's good. I have no problem. And it's not really, I wouldn't, there may be something I wouldn't do a commercial for, if I felt real strongly that, this is not good, or, I've turned down some stuff that I just didn't think that I should get involved. There was one not that long ago. I think it was for a film, and the character is like, he's a pedophile. And I said, nope, not doing it. And now, if they were offering me $10 million to maybe I could be, persuaded to do it. But I just said, you know what? They're not paying me enough money to play this, and I don't need the association. That's too much. And I just passed on that. There's some things I just, there's been a few things I just said, no, this doesn't feel right.
I had a problem. They put me in this little independent film about 3 months ago, and they told me, we're going to kill you. This is on the set. You know, we want you in this movie. So we get to this ghost town in northern Nevada. It's like 4 hours up the road. And we get there, and it's nothing but like people that are hiding from the law that live there. And so they say, okay, well, we're going to murder you. So, you know, you're waiting all day to get murdered. And you know how they piece together a movie, but they shoot it and then they piece it, and then they go, and now we're going to rape you. And I'm like,
Oh,
I'm like, nobody asked for consent. And if you're going to rape me, could you do it before you kill me? I mean, I want to have, because it's my priorities are not yours at all.
wow. What a request. Could you rape me before you kill me? Like that's the only objection I have is you rape me, you know, that's first of all, like they should have told you what this is all about. Like, and this is how you're going to be used. Do you have a problem with being raped then killed in this scene, or killed then raped? And you say, no, that's not, I want it in the other order, or I'm not going to do it. Yeah. I mean, some people would rather be killed first, but you
My
know,
electric want to do anal. I'm telling you, it's a different world now than when I'm a boomer. You know, I came out of the womb way before this Me Too thing. I can handle a rape scene, just not dead.
all right. So you're not going to play a zombie that gets raped. You know, I auditioned for it was on I can't remember the guy's name. He's famous, and it was his series that he had on one of the streaming networks, and it was getting good reviews and stuff. So I auditioned, I did well, and then they called my manager up and said, you know, we're thinking of, you know, using Brett, and then, you know, put him on hold, and does he have a problem with nudity? And they said, well, I don't think he does. What's gonna, well, you know, he's gonna show his front, and but he's gonna be wearing a prosthetic. So so the manager calls me back, and he calls me and says, you know, look, you know, you don't have a problem with doing nudity. I said, no, I don't have a problem. I said, but I need something like they said, yeah, you're gonna be wearing a prosthetic. I said, well, yeah, but tell them to make the prosthetic really big. And I'm in. And then I didn't get, then they didn't call me. Maybe there was like rumors out that I wasn't, you know, whatever. But yeah, so that would have been awkward. That would have been kind of, you know, but I wanted to do it and I would have done it. Oh, James Franco, that's who it was. Yeah, it was it was a series that he was working on, and it took place in the 70s in New York City, and where prostitution was like really all over the place, and before Giuliani cleaned it all up. But I said, you know, I'll do it if, you know, I said, well, I have to, like, it was certainly out of my comfort zone. And but I said, no, let's do it, you know, and it just didn't happen. And I was kind of like, maybe in a way, I'm kind of glad, you know, I would have been really uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
You know, so I would have done it, but I would have been super uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, they popped this whole "I want to kill and rape you" thing on me on the set. Like, you know, like I had a choice. I was 4 hours away from town. They brought me there, you know. It was unpaid.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah,
It's
that's
terrible.
the level I'm at. That's what I'm worth right now.
Yeah,
So,
you can get raped and killed for, you know, for a couple of dollars, you know, that's the different story. But not for nothing. Yeah, you can't do that. Yeah, that's, you know, and that's another thing, like when you don't get paid, and I've done projects for friends and stuff, and didn't get paid, you know, and that was okay. I wanted to do it. And but there's a big difference on how you're treated when you're getting paid compared to when you're not getting paid.
so
You
true.
know, you got to put some value on your time and you and your talent, your ability, and whatever. And you know, that has to be worth something,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know.
I was
So
lucky to get a ride there and back.
yeah. I mean, there's been so many things that I've done that I wish that that I knew what the outcome was going to be, or, I had got jerked around by a guy who was putting a film together. I had the lead role. And then all of a sudden, like almost every time I spoke to the guy, I got demoted, so I'm like, gee, I don't want to talk to this guy anymore until the shoot, because before you know it, I'm going to be a tree, and so it got worse and worse. And what really bothered me, he was CCing me on the email of the new star of the film, and which was a sitcom star. And, but if you're going to do something, do it behind my back, like, not blatantly in front of me that you have another guy that you're considering for it was just really poor. And then in the end, the role was so small. After going upstate to visit with this guy, and he had me also doing tapes with the other characters in the film. I worked really hard at it. In the end, I ended up with a really small part, and I was going to have to go upstate for a couple more days and this and that. And I said, you know what? This guy's really ticking me off. I'm done. And then I even had the manager say to me, like, walk. You got to walk from this one. And I felt bad because I usually don't like to walk away from something but I was walking away from nothing. And then the film comes out. I get invited to the premiere, but I have to buy my ticket to get in and everything else. I'm like, this guy's really, he's got a set on him, so of course I didn't go. And, but I bought the DVD when it came out because I wanted to see how the film came out in the end. And let me tell you something. It was the biggest piece of garbage that I've ever seen. It was horrible. And I thought the script was when I read the script, I said, man, this is really, I read it, my wife read it, like said, this is really cute. It was a family film. Really, really good story. And, this is going to, maybe we'll catch on. And it was just really, really bad, boring, and it went nowhere. And you know what? Even if I was the lead character or any part of this film, it still would have been boring as hell. It was just horrendous. Matter of fact, my wife couldn't even sit there the whole time to watch it. She's, I can't take it anymore. She left, and I wanted to watch it to see, is this going to go anywhere, or how are they going to wrap this up? And so a lot of time and money was put into that, and in the end, it didn't work out. And I think that they sometimes get jerked around.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's part of the business too.
Yeah, it's a rough business, all of this show business stuff.
Yeah.
Who's the one person in your life that you met that you'll never forget?
You.
Oh, I love it. I'll take it. Don't change
Yeah.
your mind.
Without, all right, so you're out of the picture, so I have to, now we got to, the one person that I'll never forget, I think there's really two, make it three. So I got my mom and my dad, really.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think about them every day, it's just, so they had the most impact. They did the most for me. They're the most supportive, the most encouraging. Nobody else has ever come along and has given me so much, and nobody ever will. So I've been really lucky, in that end. I have no regrets with that, with my parents and whatever. I don't talk to my brother and sister anymore, but that's a whole other show. That's a Jerry Springer show. But but when it comes to my parents, yeah, I definitely couldn't have done better there. So those two. Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. But there's been a lot of great people, really nice people. I have a good wife. I got, my kids are great. I have some really good friends. I don't have a ton of friends. I have a nice chunk. Like I'm not one of those people that, that just, got hundreds of friends and No, I
Yeah.
just, I got a handful, really good friends. That's all I need.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
I like keeping people at a distance. This last week, well, actually, I think it was like yesterday, some comic said to me he was going to kill himself and how, and he was going to kill somebody else and then himself. And he started popping pills while he's messaging me, and he's telling me the milligrams and the pills, and he's telling me how he's going to kill a certain person by name. And I had to report him. I felt like a schmuck,
No,
Yeah.
you're maybe saving,
like
you should have said, kill yourself first before you kill the other guy, just like the whole rape thing, you know? Um, yeah, but I also had somebody who was sending me messages like that. And I really told him, and he's a really good filmmaker. And I told him that like you got to get help. He wasn't threatening to kill somebody else, but he was like, he goes, I really should kill myself. And I said to him, please get some help. I said, you have an ex-wife and you have kids and like you got a career, you're a good filmmaker, like just got to get some help. And
Yeah.
and then on occasion he messages me like just like bad mouthing somebody else that somebody that I know that I like, and I can't respond to those messages. I just ignore them and and hope the guy will be okay. But get help, and that's crazy stuff. Yeah. And it's this guy's obviously not too stable and he needs help. And I don't know why he would want to send me a message saying that like my good friend so-and-so is a terrible actor and this and that. Like, I'm not going to get into the whole bad mouthing everybody. I'm not going to join that party, and it goes nowhere. It just causes all kinds of problems and it's not fun. I don't
No,
get
I
any
hate
pleasure
it.
out of saying something negative about somebody, um, or tearing somebody down or anything, just there's no reason for that.
None whatsoever.
So people should be a little kinder and people should care a little bit more and cut people maybe a little bit more slack, that we're not perfect and we do make mistakes, and like roll with it a little bit. And then I've had this conversation a few times with people like about people making a big deal over nothing, and like, just put it in perspective. This is, some of this stuff, it's not life or death, it's not, it's an acting role, or it's you had a bad comedy set. So was anybody killed? Did anybody die because you didn't do well? No, it's not earth shattering stuff, but when you do have somebody that's threatening and like that, you have to take it seriously, because
Yeah.
not taking it seriously can cost somebody their life. And you don't
You
know
know,
whether somebody's joking or
some people say, oh, if they're talking about it, they just want attention. The people that are really serious don't talk about it. I don't think that's true. I think it's probably a percentage of each that happen. I don't think
right.
you can say
Yeah,
that.
some people, I think there's some people that do talk about it, and actually, and it does happen. And then people will say, well, I kind of noticed that he was down the last time I saw him, or I noticed that he didn't seem like he was his typical self. They're dropping clues, left and right. And people, people have to pick up on that. If you really care about somebody, say something. you know um I I was taking some medication that was throwing me off, and the doctor prescribed too much of it. I was supposed to work my way up to that amount, and something got screwed up, and they prescribed 4 times the amount that I was supposed to have, and it really, it changed me, because I wasn't totally there. Like I was just a little, I was dizzy and everything. So somebody, kept saying, "Are you okay?" Like saying it to me, and I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. It's just medication." And she says, "Are you sure?" Like the guy was, checking me out to make sure I was all right, and I said, like, "Yeah, I'm okay. It's just this medication and stuff like that." But you gotta, you know, think about the worst case scenario, and it could happen. So I
Good.
think what you did was good, and hopefully that person, you know, gets control of everything, and you know, and doesn't cause any harm to himself or others.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a rough world we live in.
I was on the phone talking to a guy that performed often at the major landmark place. I'm forgetting the name of it in Manhattan, where all the legendary people perform. It's not a club, it's a membership thing. What's that called?
Oh, in the Friars Club?
Yes, I was.
Oh.
He had me on his radio show. I don't want to say his name, as a
Okay.
character actor, like weekly. And I was talking to him, and he had been going through an upheaval in his marriage. He was talking about it. And next thing I knew, the person who I was living with up in Ardsley, New York,
No,
he
not too
just
far.
got-
Yeah, I know what that is.
yeah, this gentleman said, things aren't going well with his wife, and could that guy give him a room too? And I said, well, I talked to George, and George said no, and we didn't think anything about it. 30 minutes later, he put a gun to his head.
Wow.
So I
That's
do take
horrible.
things serious,
Wow. Yeah, that's horrible. Yeah. And that person was a comedian? Yeah. Yeah. You just don't know. I mean, like, and people in show business, a lot of them are not hooked up that good. They're a little, you got to be a little off to be in show business. I mean, it doesn't mean you need to be a jerk, but there's something odd about people that need the attention of strangers. I've always tried to figure that out. Like, why is that important to me? Why do I care? Why do I care what some stranger thinks of me? Like, how does that change my life? And why do I have to sell them? Why do I have to make sure that they like me and will support? Like, it's a very weird, I kind of wish I would have been happy just doing a normal job, and work hard and just, punch in, punch out, but that's not the direction that wasn't the direction that even entered my head,
Yeah.
but it is bizarre because everybody that I know in show business is a little bit, what I can't stand are those folks that are just so self-centered that they can't even have a normal conversation. And that drives me nuts, and they can't talk about anything but the business. And when I'm hanging out with people in the business, it's kind of like, that's what we talk about. We talk shop, but if you're with normal people and it's like, you just can't stop with the show business stuff. It's like, a lot of people don't care, and
They're always telling you their comedy, that they're working on this joke. What do you think about that? And it's like,
yeah, it's
stop.
always terrible. Yeah. It's always like, they don't realize that, like, I can't use that joke in my act because it comes out of left field. It doesn't even fit, they don't understand. They think a joke is a joke is a joke, and that's it. You can put it anywhere. It's interchangeable. It's not. Or they'd say, like, of course, that old one, right? You're a comedian, now tell us a joke. And I said, I don't really do jokes like that. Well, just tell some of your material. Let's hear it. Like, no, I don't feel like performing right now. Put me on stage and some people sitting in the audience, and I'll do my act. But you're talking about, I think earlier, about getting up in front of people. Like, I'm really, or no, you were saying that you went in and entertained somebody that was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And that to me would be one of the hardest things in the world to do, a one-on-one type of show. Or even, I mean, when I've done clubs where there's only 2 or 3 people in the audience, I usually don't do well. I'm not good with just a couple of people. I'm good with I've done theaters, where there was like 1,000 people in the audience. I would feel more comfortable doing that than doing the one person show, just one audience member in a hospital. I mean, I would have passed on that gig. I would rather go up there with some balloons and wish them well. But to do material, I was like, I can't do it. It doesn't work for me. But you did it, and that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was so, I love my veterans. I'm a veteran. I'll go under a bridge to entertain a homeless veteran or somebody in a mansion if he's, sad. It doesn't matter. But you know, I I'll go up to I ride the train across the country to New York usually once a year. I'll do comedy shows on the train. I'll just pass out things and go, "Hey, we're having a show at 6 o'clock. Be there." And people will do it. And then I have my own show. I don't have a booker. I'm not getting paid, but I'm getting fans. I get a stage time, you know.
Wow. Yeah, that takes a lot of guts. That takes a lot of guts. I mean, if I was on a train, that would be the last thing I would think of.
I've
You know?
done it at the airport. Southwest Airlines will give you the microphone.
Wow.
What do I
Yeah, that's
care? I'll never see him again. Them fly by nights.
yeah, no, that's great. I just that takes a lot. I mean, I've worked without a microphone before, you know, in a club, but to be in a situation that that's not like an ideal situation where there's people walking by all the time, that's rough. You know, you need like a captive audience, for comedy and but to pull it off where, you know, it's kind of like just people walking around, that's hard, very hard.
You can go here in Vegas and stand on Fremont Street in a little circle that they have a number assigned to. You can sign up to be there for 2 hours for free and just kind of tell your jokes like a barker, and people will stop and stare at you and look at you, and you can leave a tip bucket there, and it's fun to do.
Wow. But that's known that people actually do kind of show up to watch, you know, they know about that spot. And they say, well, I'm going down to that spot. I'm gonna see some entertainment.
Yeah, there's like 20 of those spots. So they
Oh,
can
wow.
actually make a trip of it, you know, and just go to each one and see who's doing what. Somebody might be taking palm trees and turning them into roses. And another person might be a drummer, and another is a cellist. And then, oh no, a comedian.
Because it's a on the street variety show. That's something. I mean, I could see a musician doing something, you know, a person playing guitar and singing, whatever, but telling jokes like that in that kind of situation, that's rough.
Yeah,
Unless you're doing a lot of crowd work.
I really like inserting my comedy where it doesn't belong in the most difficult situation. That has been my forte. Like, you give me a situation nobody wants, I want it. Because nobody else wants it. Give me that.
Yeah, it's like, you know, well, you know, it's like I want to get booked down at the Port Authority. Who books that room? Yeah. The noisiest, craziest, you know. Yeah, that's
I walked up to the police at Port Authority and did a set.
so there you go. I mean, that's wow. Did they appreciate it?
They smiled, and you know, you could tell that they were like, wow, I can't believe anybody cares. Or is that crazy? I don't know. Something was going on. They were thinking something.
Yeah, that takes a lot of guts. Yeah,
Yeah.
that takes a lot of guts.
What do you want people to remember? I think people are going to remember I'm Michigana for sure. Like, you know, without the brain injury, they're going to remember I'm Michigana. What do you want people to remember you? I don't even have to try for people to think I'm Michigana. What do you want people to remember you for?
I guess just the guy that's doing different interesting things, you know, and you know, a good person, like, you know, that, you know, I'm not out to hurt anybody. I'm not out to you know, I care about what people, you know, what people are going through, and you know, I watch the news all the time, and it's heartbreaking. You know,
Yeah.
it's just really, really, really sad. And you know, I mean, this morning I saw something on TV, and then I'm like, man, like, if you have $100 million, you take $1 million of that, and you can put these poor people into another venue, open up another warehouse so people can get out of the cold, and you know, that's going on all around here, or upstate, way upstate in Buffalo and everything else. Like $1 million can save lives left and right. But you know, I can't tell somebody else how to spend their money, And, but it's like, that could be a solution. I just think that I wish people would be a little bit more generous, um, with the country that gave them the opportunity to make that kind of money. Sure, they may think they deserve it and all this other, you're great, but you mean like you had the opportunity to do it. And we have people that's in life and death situations. It's time to, and a lot of them do it, that we don't even know about. But I mean, I would have a tough time, not helping out, and I do I do whatever I can, even local charities where I am, and I try to contribute as much as I can. But I got to watch myself too. I have a mortgage. I have a house. I get, you know, um, I'm not a multi-millionaire, and so I can't give as much as I really would like to. And, so I wish people would step it up who have really cashed in. And, it's time to, like, show that you care, and I don't know how you can be sitting on this pile of cash, even like being older and saying, I got plenty of money for my kids. I got plenty of money for my grandchildren. Everybody's set and and I'm still sitting on this mound of money. And like, okay, so what are you going to do with it? What if you got everybody taken care of? Why can't you help out in a certain situation that's life threatening like this? I don't know. It's just maybe that's why they have money, because they don't spend it on anything. I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they got there by screwing people over, and they just don't care about people. I mean, there's always people going to jail, for all kinds of trouble, who made a ton of money at something, and then all of a sudden, well, I kind of knew that he was doing something illegal. He has too much money, So yeah, I just want to do my thing. I want to I want to make a really good living. There's things in my house that I want to, I want to do some upgrading, and doing this and that, but you got to work and get paid. And so just want people to think that I'm a decent person and that I'm hardworking.
Very valuable to be thought of that
Yeah,
way.
that's it. I just don't like, and then it does upset me when somebody doesn't like me or doesn't value me at all. It's a kind of like, really, like I how can I do things differently to meet your approval? Or, like, how can you not see the good in me? Like, what did I do for you not to see that? And obviously, and I'm specifically talking about my brother and sister in that case.
Got it.
What, we had a falling out, and then so obviously, but what did I ever do? And I'm sure, they have their reasons, and it's, to them, it's a valid reason. You have people in this world that kill people during the week. Sunday they go to church, ask for forgiveness. Monday morning start killing again, and mafia people like that, and people doing all kinds of crooked stuff that in their own head they say, what, I'm doing this because I can do it, and no one's going to stop me. And they go through life, just not being authentic, being real. And sometimes they go to jail. They get caught and they say, gee, I kind of knew they were doing something illegal. I don't know what they were doing, but they were, you felt there was something going on that wasn't right.
Exactly. You get that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, there's this girl that I dated whose brother, like, this was a million years ago, and he was running like a thrift shop or something in Manhattan, and really just selling a bunch of crap. It was like there's a store full of crap. And I didn't, I'd go down and see the store, and there's like really people, there wasn't that many people going into the store. There's like just crap. And he was living in this loft space and had like regulation sized basketball area. And then they had this copy machine that was just way over the top for what he's like. You had a several $1,000 copy machine for somebody who's like running a thrift shop and everything. Like what? And then the cars and the homes and things like that. And I'm like, something's not right here. And sure enough, he got busted. The IRS went in there and they snagged him on all kinds of charges, and they got, they closed down his crap store, and they also lost the loft and everything else. Everything that he had was illegitimate, and wasn't earned,
Yeah,
the right way. And I
exactly.
knew it. I was making, he showed too much money for what he was doing at this store. It didn't make
Absolutely.
sense. So, but yeah. Just
Where
keep,
do you want people to follow you, and where can we see you perform? How can we help you by buying anything that you got out there, like videos, specials, movies? Is anything going to put money in your pocket that we can do?
well, outside of show business, I invented a product, and that is that's something I've been working on since early 2016. And so I'm at the point, I have 3 patents on it. Got a trademark. I got it's ready to be mass produced, but to go into production is just really, really expensive, and the marketing of it, the whole deal. So I'm looking to license it to a company. So if anybody's, I should show them what it looks like. Let's see.
I'm going to grab a pen and write this down.
Okay. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, I'm back.
All right. So here, I hope you have rich friends.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
We need more.
We
Or-
need to find somebody that's suicidal, but they're not ready to kill themselves. They're at the stage where they're giving away all their possessions.
Yeah, we need to meet rich people who are generous, very generous. So I invented this product, and this is my last prototype on it, but it's called ProMat 99. Let's see. What this is, it's a soul sanitizing device. You put this where your mat would be, like by your front door. You go in, you wipe your feet on this, then you step over to this. This is a UVC light. It shines on the bottom of your shoe. It kills 99.9% of the germs, viruses, bacteria on the bottom of your shoe, including the coronavirus. And this is kind of a, here's all that. It's actually going the other way. So I gotta, right over here, you can see like it says germs, and then steps on it, and then boom, germ free. And it's a cool product, and it's highly effective. I've had it tested in labs, a couple of times, and I think that people would buy something like this, and that's why I believe in it. I'm actually going out to Vegas for a couple of days to the Consumer Electronics Show that's happening in the first week of the, and I'm going to be spending a couple of days at that convention, going around and meeting with people and talking to electronics companies and things like that. I also have another guy who wants to possibly do like a redesign of this. We, do another prototype to make it even sharper looking, so, and set it up a little bit differently, but basically the same concept. Now this is portable, and it's also battery operated, or you can keep the plug in. So if you wanted to take this with you to your guest house, or you're going somewhere and you want to just take it with you, you can take it with you. You can fold it. It folds up, and you can take it wherever you have a yacht. You can bring it on your yacht, and anywhere you go. And it's safe, it's effective, and it's just a nice little added protection, of germs and bacteria. I mean, yeah, you're supposed to wipe your hand, wash your hands and keep yourself clean. And, and this is just another way of doing it. Is there such a thing as 100% effective? No. You can never like fully sanitize a place completely, and then somebody walks in and now it's not sanitized anymore. So this helps. And especially if you have little kids on the floor and they're crawling around this would do the trick. So I'm looking for, and I'm talking to electronics companies that can manufacture this, and then I would just license it to them. If I don't get a licensing deal, then I'm going to possibly go into production with it through, maybe use a couple of investors and then do it that way. And so I've been pushing this for the last year, 2 years now that it's been completed and all the testing's been done. I just think I think there's a right fit out there somewhere. I just I haven't hit them yet.
Yeah, as far as investors, I will mention it, but also, I'm thinking it'd be great for nurseries, assisted living, anywhere where people are compromised, crawling on the floor, made me think about nurseries and daycares. I want
Right,
one for my door.
there
Every
you
time
go.
I go walking, and every day when I'm walking, I'm thinking, I have nothing against the homeless, but they are out there in the elements, and chances are they're not getting the showers and washing their hands that
Or vaccinated.
yeah, like us, we're lucky to get that. They're not. So when I'm
Yeah.
walking, I could be bringing germs into my house on my feet.
Yeah. I mean, the idea came to me when after walking around a park, and they had all the Canada geese there. And I know that I'm stepping in it like crazy. And then I'm going home and I'm walking into my house and I'm taking my shoe off and I'm putting my hand down there. Like, that's gross. Or go to any rest stop, a gas station, use the bathroom at a gas station. And it's disgusting what you're tracking around. And a lot of these germs or pathogens, they come into your house and they could become airborne. And you're just walking it right into your house. So I never really want to tell people like take off your shoes when they're coming in. It's kind of awkward for me. So I don't even tell people to take off their shoes. And this would be a nice thing just so now you would, they wipe their feet, then they go on to the UVC, side of it. And they're good, they're good to go. And you're not dragging this, dragging it all around your house. So that's what I've been really working on. And that's like I have to get that taken care of. Either the licensing deal or getting it out onto the market somehow. Like I said, I may do a redesign of this, even though this is like the 5th prototype. So we'll do another one. And each time it's gotten nicer and nicer. So there's different ways of going about it. So yeah, if anybody's out there that wants to invest or should say, or works for an electronics company that you think this would be a good fit, or a UV or a company that sells UVC products, that's that would be great. I'd love to talk to them. And
Have
I
you
believe
thought about Shark Tank, or is that just a
well,
bunch of
no, Shark Tank is legit, in a sense that people do get deals on there. And there's a lot of products that I've seen get launched on Shark Tank that, I think Ring Doorbell was on there. I think phone soap and a whole bunch of things. I mean, but here's the deal. Like with me, I have everything but product. I have no sales. So if I went on Shark Tank and say, look, I'm looking for $300,000 to go into production and I'll give you 15% of 3. Like they'll say, well, how can you evaluate your company like that? You're not a company yet. You're just a product. You just have a prototype. So which is absolutely true. So so the stage that I'm in right now, unless I went in and they just totally liked me and would do anything that I'm, that I've seen very, very few times I've seen that, but I have seen it done. But getting onto that show without having, sales and having this, already been successful, they love jumping onto something that's already successful that they can bring to the next level. It's kind of true, tried and tested, with little risk. If I went onto Shark Tank and I said, I've sold 10,000 units this year, I'm looking for a bigger audience and I'm looking for, If I got on QVC, we can, like they would say, yeah, well, this guy sold 10,000. I mean, how much did you make? Oh, we made, X amount of dollars, and it sounds impressive. Then I think since it's successful, all the work's been done, they would possibly jump on.
Got it. Have you thought about going to crowdfunding to get people to donate the money on the internet crowdfunding website?
Yes. Yeah. I did a Kickstarter campaign, and I found out that if you do not use the marketing people associated with Kickstarter or Indiegogo, actually, no, it was an Indiegogo campaign. I tried Kickstarter. They didn't want anything to do with UVC and things like that. So or I was making claims that they thought I couldn't make. And meanwhile, I said, I'll show you laboratory results. This is all, I'm not making any claims that I can't prove. So I went to Indiegogo, and they're the same deal. Like, they have marketing companies that they're in cahoots with. If you go to them and spend a lot of money on video and marketing stuff and everything else, then you can get seen on these sites. If you do not use their marketing people, you're going to get onto their site, and they're going to put you in a spot where nobody's going to see you at all. And that's what happened to me. And I didn't know that until after the fact, because I was able to see the data of which people were going to, like, the people that got to me were the only ones that came through Facebook and friends and family. And those are the only people that knew about it. Those are the only people that got there. There was not one person that saw it that was on Indiegogo that was there and just stumbled into it or anything. And they all have products that we love. That's a paid spot. They make it look like we're helping. We want to help everybody and everything else. No, they want to make money. It's a business. So if you want to bring in $1 million on an Indiegogo campaign or a Kickstarter campaign, be prepared to spend $100,000 on marketing on the site, and using their marketing people. If you want to bring in 100,000, you're probably going to have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 on marketing through their marketing people to raise that kind of money. So I already spent that money with other ways, so I didn't go through their people because I didn't know that I needed to. But you have to.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
a lesson.
Yes,
Yeah.
I found that out after the fact.
Will you send me something so that I can make a special post just about your invention? See if anybody, I know people, there's a lady in New Mexico that she's all about, she operates on a whole different plane of possibilities and high vibration of love, and anything's she really takes it, and she was able to find Home Depot to donate a brand new stove to a needy veteran a couple days ago.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
there are
Wow.
people out there that do want to do good and don't want nothing for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to get through to Home Depot, she had to go through a lot of channels and a lot of people that couldn't help her, and she must have really worked it.
She did, like, in 3 hours, she did it.
Wow, 3 hours.
So let's put it out and see if she sees it and does something with it.
So I could send you. I have a link to the video. There's so I can send you a link to the video that basically shows it in action.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, and just feel free to put my phone number or my email address up there.
Okay.
And thank you. I appreciate that. And it's time for me to get that deal done with. And it's been like a monkey on my back, in a sense that I've worked so hard on it, and I've spent a ton of money on it. And it's time for me to make a deal,
Yeah.
and I just have to find the right company or have to go to the next step, trying to get these produced and get some investors involved. But
I can see it. I can see it, when you walk in, when you have a doorman and you walk in the first door before you get to the second door, I can see it right there in every place around the world.
Yeah. And somebody said they could see it in like an urgent care type of place, and when you're signing in and stuff. And, there's a lot of different, places that there's possibilities, and this could be made a little bit differently to accommodate those other places. But I was thinking completely residential when I started to think about this, but there's no end to where it can go. Was one company I was talking to that does a lot of UVC work, but they're really more in air purification, and units that cost $17,000 a piece. I'm trying to put something out on the market that's going to cost maybe a tops $300. Make it affordable for everybody.
When you go to the airport and they have you take off your shoes, sometimes you're like, oh man, now I have to walk on this. And it would be great when you get through the TSA screening thing to have something to UVC your feet.
Right. Yeah. Or the bottom of your socks at the time, because you
Yeah.
just walked on a dirty floor. Yeah, absolutely. And this could do the trick, or we could make a different model that would fit, that would fit right in with what they're doing. And if it needs a little bit of a rubber ramp, or you need to have it embedded into the ground, like there's so many things you can do. You can hardwire it. Like mine's battery operated, but you can run a cord to it and keep it plugged in if you want. I made it battery operated so people can take it with them different places. Also, you wouldn't have to run an extension cord across your living room or dining room, wherever you're getting your power from. So I try to make it compact, easy to work. And there's another thing that I'm going to add to this, as when the time comes, I could set a weight limit on it, where if a child, is like under 60 pounds, the light won't go on. Or if an animal or a dog or a pet, a cat or whatever, walk on it, the light won't go off. It will only go off for adults, and that's not in this unit, but it's certainly easy enough to be done. And that's something that I want to add to this, that I thought about after the fact, and maybe for if I do another prototype, that's going to have that. There's also a material that I wanted to try out, but I couldn't. Some companies will not sell you samples. If you're going to order 1,000 sheets, that's a whole other story. But if you're going to order just a little, they're like, no, we can't do it. Because they have to put it through the whole processing and the whole deal. So there are materials that I want to experiment with that I think could make this product a lot better.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you for
Thank
that
you.
invention that can really help a lot of people. I'm telling you.
Keep people healthier.
Yes.
I mean,
Where
I'm
do you
using
plan
mine.
on perform? You send me the stuff, I'll promote it, and I'll
Thank
tag
you.
a couple people, and you'll know that's because they have connections.
Thank you.
And then, would you mind telling people where you're going to be performing, or remind us about that red carpet thing coming up, where we can go online to follow you too?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the red carpet is in Cranberry, New Jersey, or Canberry. But there's only a couple of seats left. It may even be sold out right at this time. That's on the 28th. It's the Theater of Terror anthology, the second anthology. But that's going to be the haunted film that I'm in. I'm also doing an improv show on January 20th in Westchester County at the Westchester Collaborative Theater. And I'll be in Las Vegas for a couple of days to try to meet up with companies and discuss this whole ProMat thing with them. I got my cards, I got my sheets, I got everything, and I'm ready to rock. And then if they want to follow me, I have a page on Facebook that's like my comedy page, but I don't really go to it much. So they could just friend request me on my regular Facebook page. I still have like 2,500 available spots, to have another person. I think you're allowed 5,000, and I'm only at 2,500. So, and that's just Brett Eidman, BRETT EIDMAN. And I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, even though I don't go onto those sites all that much. But if you if you want to get involved with the ProMat 99 thing, that'd be great to hear from anybody that's listening, watching, that'd be great. Yeah, more the merrier.
Are you going to be performing any stand up here in Vegas?
No,
Do you
no.
desire to?
No. No.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in and out. I'm going out there Thursday and I'm coming home Sunday. And
Which convention center are you going to be at? I live literally across the street from the one on Sierra Vista and Paradise, that convention center.
yeah, so they have the Las Vegas Convention Center. That's one of the venues. It's also at the Venetian, and it's like 5 or 6 of the hotels. This convention is over 2 million square feet of vendors and 2,800 vendors. So it's a monster, and I'm psyched to go out there and spend my time going through it and talking to people in the industry about what I have and collecting business cards and phone numbers and work, networking with these folks. If a deal can't be made, or get the ball rolling on it, I've had so many close calls. It's been remarkable how many, like, I've had like major companies that I thought were gonna, we were talking back and forth, and then one reason or another, it didn't happen, whether it wasn't just a perfect fit or the company at this moment is not going in the direction of UVC. I mean, I talked to the people from Lysol and Clorox, LG and different, and I'm getting callbacks. I mean, they're calling me back and they're interested, and then sometimes it's just not the right moment for what they're doing. So I also had a potential license, an agreement with another company, and it got to the point where the lawyers were discussing the agreement, and then the agreement, fell through because of consultants and the doctors that were investing got into a big riff, and it just ended. It had nothing to do with my product or me. So that was super close. And I think they would have done really well with it. They wanted to put my product out, excuse me. They wanted to put my product out with another product that was similar to mine, except really high end, expensive. That high end product did not pass the test that we put put my unit through, that passed with flying colors and for effectiveness. And so between the riff and that other product not being able to go, they were like, we're going to just scrap the whole thing, and which was a big letdown. But that's what happens.
Yeah.
And but a deal will be made at some point, because I'm not gonna stop until one is. And if I can't get a licensing deal, like I said, I'm gonna do a complete redesign, and I'll get a couple investors involved, and we'll put it out ourselves and market it ourselves, and then go from there. But I'd rather get the licensing deal, and that's why I'm going to Vegas. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've been a dream to get to know this way. I've known you quite a long time on Facebook Messenger, but it's been such a treat for me, Brett.
Well, thank you. It's been a treat for me too. It's been really nice talking to you.
Nice
And I know,
talking.
yeah, we've known each other for a few years on Facebook at least. I don't
Yeah.
know where we, connected or how it connected. I guess through comedians and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I just remember for the longest time we've had little quick interchanges, and I've been dying. And when I saw all that you've accomplished, I've been dying to have you come on and share some nuggets of information, and you sure delivered today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. No, I just it was just nice that I'm sorry it took me so long to do this.
I don't care. It doesn't
Okay.
matter.
Well, I
It's
appreciate
been
it.
worth it every minute that I've waited. It didn't make me mad. It just made me realize you gotta be nice and cut people slack and wait.
Yeah.
And if
Well,
it's meant, it'll happen.
thanks for cutting me slack, because I I don't, that doesn't usually happen to me. I must have been so sidetracked a few times in my ADD and this and that. I just, and then, I don't like doing it. Like if I say I'm going to do it, I want to do it, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm glad we finally got to do it.
Yes, it's been a treat for me and a half. Well, I hope to be able to take you to coffee at the Renaissance. If you're at any of the conventions by the Renaissance on Sierra Vista and Paradise, let me buy you a cup of coffee at the Starbucks in there.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll see how things go, you know,
Okay.
that would be great.
All righty. Well, thank you
All
and
right.
good luck at the CES convention.
Thank you
Right?
very much. And I'll talk to you soon and I'll send you
Okay.
some information.
Yes, yes. And good luck in Canberry or Cranberry, Connecticut.
You know what? Now I think about it, I think it is Canberry.
Canberry,
Not Cran-
Connecticut.
Well, you have Danbury, but in Jersey, I think it's Canberry. Yeah, I think it's Canberry. But
Super.
all right,
I'd love to see how that goes for you. Let me know how that
I will.
opening goes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you
Yes,
soon.
absolutely. Bye.
Bye-bye.